it'll be out. Oh, one day when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome everyone this evening to Beacon of Hope. We hold no rights to this song by John Lemon, legend and common, but we certainly believe in the message. One day when the war is won and one day when the glory comes, all of this will be ours and we will say glory, because that's what we're waiting on. We're waiting for all of this stuff to be over. But we are here tonight back in our usual spot, and we thank you so much for joining us and being a part of the Beacon of Hope, conversations with clergy women and other professionals. And tonight we are back talking about the effects of the pandemic and mental health. And I am the Reverend Dr. Sherry Austin, the founder and moderator of Beacon of Hope. This all began with the cry of George Floyd when he called out to his mother, and as for any mother who would respond to a cry of their son or their child. And this organization, Beacon of Hope, was founded based on that kind of call. And we are here because we want to make a response to all that is going on in this world. There are so many areas in which we can address this pandemic. And now we've been in it for over a year. And we certainly didn't expect to be in this pandemic this long, but the effects of the pandemic focus and are on everything and everybody. The pandemic affects the social justice issues and voter suppression, and this COVID-19 loss of hundreds of thousands of lives, and the list goes on. So tonight, we are here back to continue our discussion with another pressing issue of this pandemic and the crisis of our times: mental health, signs, suggestions, solutions, and how we can deal with these issues. All of this has been exacerbated all the more because this pandemic seems to be so slow to leave. And so we're here tonight, one full year later, responding to this world that's in a whirlwind. Mental health. Mental health is more than the absence of mental disorder. It is the ability to live a full and productive life in the midst of a pandemic. So there are very few who are not affected by this pandemic in one way or another. But we're here tonight to respond to some of those issues and some of the concerns that affect our world today. Many of you may have specific questions that or concerns that relate to yourself or your loved one as it pertains to mental health. Conditions and personalized answers may not be easy to find, but we are here tonight to help you find those things that are might be coping mechanisms that will be helpful and might lead you to a more comfortable end. So be sure to interact with us. Be sure to let us know you are there. Be sure to send us your concerns and your questions, and we will do our best to answer your questions and acknowledge the fact that you are tuned in. We are an intergenerational gathering of clergy and other professionals, and our panelists come with a wealth of experience, and they have been engaged daily with these kinds of issues. So sit back, relax, take a breather, and let us pour a little refreshment into your spirit. Let's meet our panelists. First, we have Dr. Margaret O. Weaver, PhD. She has been working in the field of mental health for over 35 5 years. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and the founding partner of Keystone Counseling Center in Stockbridge, Georgia. She comes with a wealth of experience, and she comes with something that she works every day. But she said today, this is a little different because we take a different perspective for which we will be addressing the issues that come in. That is Dr. Margaret Weaver, PhD, psychology therapist. Second, we have Minister Margaret Conley. I'm gonna make you a doctor yet, Dr. Weaver. Another Dr. Weaver, a licensed clinical social worker. She is the owner of Mending Life Concepts, LLC. She has her own counseling firm. She holds a Master of Divinity degree, and she also has a business that is functioning in Smyrna, Georgia. She has been in this service for over 10 years and comes with a wealth of experiences focusing on trauma, substance abuse, church and family healing, and is able to bring comfort to those who are seeking. Now, our next panelist has not yet arrived, and I'll take the time to introduce her once she gets here. I don't want to spend the time. Sometimes we are on so many Zoom meetings, and I know she told me she had one that she would be getting off, so I'm just making an explanation that we pray she'll be able to make it in here. But she'll when she comes in, I'll introduce her. Will that be all right? Okay, let's go. Let's go to the questions. Let's have a basic refresher question. I'm going to ask this question to both Dr. Margaret and Minister Margaret. Here's the question. What is mental health? And what are the signs of mental health? Speak to us, speak to our listening audience on what is mental health. And would you make it so that the everyday novice can understand?
Well, I think that when we talk about mental health, what we're referencing is really a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. It doesn't mean that the person is without problems. It does mean that they're able to cope. They might have problems on the job or in relationships, but they can work through it. And again, there's just an ability to cope. I also like to think of mental health as a person essentially having what the French would call joie de vivre, which means just a kind of enjoyment of life and willing to embrace life.
Okay. So mental health then, if we take it from the positive end, it's really enjoying the life we live. Mm-hmm. Can you say it that way?
That's a good way to say it.
And then sometimes we have challenges that interfere on the joy that we're having in life, and that's when the issues come in. So I'm living my life, and I could say it's full of joy, even right now in the midst of this pandemic, and that's what we have to do. The Dr. Minister Margaret Conley, speak to us on what is mental health.
I have to believe that everyone has mental health that they need to take care of. So it is rooted in how we enjoy life. And so if it's interrupted, then of course that interrupts the enjoyment of life. And so I know our new phrase over the last 10 years, we've kind of moved over into emotional wellness. And what does that look like to kind of scale it? But as far as mental health, everyone has a mental health that they need to take care of. I tell my clients that because they think mental health means crazy. I'm like, no, if you have a brain and you have a human brain, then you have mental health that you need to be aware of. And so here's that awareness of it. And so it's right now that I think COVID-19 actually put us in a space where everybody realized that they needed to take care of that. And that health concern actually became equivalent with the physical health aspect. So I know I saw a rise in that care, and you realize that mental health and physical health go hand in hand. So everybody has mental health, and everybody has a right to emotional wellness, that we can see where that enjoyment scale of life can move and how we can send that in the highest maximum possibility, or say biblically, we have life abundantly for my Bible scholars watching. So yes.
All right. That's that master of divinity coming through. Have life and have it more abundantly. I like that. And the whole idea, because sometimes, as we say, mental health, sometimes if we interpret it, may be interpreted from the negative perspective, but it really is living and loving and enjoying life the best that you can with where you are. And so it's emotional wellness. I like that. Thank you so much. Let's continue to move on with our questions. And I got this because a person asked me, she said, Sherry, how do I know? You know, I'm going through some things, but how do I know if I need some help? What are the signs? How do I recognize when it's time to do something about the way I feel? What are the signs that would show that we are not as you may know that you're not happy, but what do you do, or when do you make the move to seek some help or just find somebody to talk to? Both of you, let's
Well, I think that if you notice certain changes taking place in your life, for example, you're not able to sleep, you lose your appetite, or you overeat. Again, what you look at are what kind of changes are taking place. Some people lose energy. There's no motivation. When you get to a place where it's hard for you to get out of the bed in the morning, and at times you find yourself calling in to work because you don't feel like going in to work. So, I mean, those are some of the kinds of things that can happen that indicate that you need to do something. If you become so overwhelmed with anxiety that it's interfering with your ability to function. And I think that's one of the key things to look at. There's what we call the activities of daily living. When you find yourself having difficulty with those activities of daily living, you don't want to shower in the morning. You don't feel like getting dressed. The personal hygiene starts going down. So those are some of the things that you begin to look for that suggest that there is a problem.
Okay, let's hear your thoughts on that, Minister Margaret Conley.
I can't say it better than Dr. Weaver did. I mean, she the first Margaret spoke correctly. But we do measure it from that, and I think that was and please, Dr. Weaver, correct me, because as mental health professionals, I think we've all had to sit in correction in COVID, because it was a lot of things, truthfully. For those who are watching, these were first for us too, you know. So it was a lot of theoretical work that went into play. But one thing that we attempted to be proactive about in the mental health profession was the ADLs, our everyday living skills, bathing, and what are we eating, and those were the first things we jumped to, because we knew those would be the first things to be hit, because COVID put everybody, people argue with me because it sounds like a generalization. Dr. Weaver, please correct me. But everybody hit a space of depression and anxiety because this was new. And so the world hit a space of dip down into our emotional scale, because I don't know what it feels like, especially in westernized culture. In America, I don't know what it feels like to be forced to do something, for those who are not, who do not embody or have that intergenerational trauma of being forced. So, for our brothers and sisters who are white, this literally dipped into their system really bad, because you're forcing me to wear masks. You're forcing me to sanitize. You're forcing me. You won't feed me if I don't have a mask on. You won't serve me if I don't have a mask on. And so we watched how different ethnicities managed in mental wellness. We watched how different cultural aspects of America managed in how they handled the emotional wellness piece. Even the insurrection at the Capitol, that was one I thought it was really different. It was 3 different ethnicities that were questioned: white, Black, and Latina. And they all came up with 3 different answers from the insurrection about fear. It was the same question, what was the fear? For white people, they said, I thought I was going to die. That was the first thing. I thought they were going to kill us. Black people said, I thought they were going to enslave us. I thought they were going to take our rights away. And for the Latina population, I thought they were going to capture us and put us back in spaces that were unsafe. So that's the same question. 3 different answers from lawmakers. I mean, these individuals make our laws. That lets you know in something that is heightened, what happens. And it was just discombobulated, which led to this space of unknowing. And so we all had to figure that out. And that's really important as we go through this conversation, I would think, to talk about that. Like, what does it look like to manage our emotional wellness in the midst of pandemic that's still going on? I know the numbers in the hospitals have went down, but we're again in a space of unknowing because we don't know if the vaccination is really going to work. So here's the unknowing. And what are we seeing? We're watching people lie to get the vaccination. They don't know how to handle the order or structure of things. So because they want this life, and that's literally base need movement. Like, I want to live, so I'm going to fight to get to the top. We're also watching people say, I don't want to do it because of intergenerational trauma, because I don't want to be a Tuskegee experiment. I've literally heard that 2 times this week.
Oh my goodness.
So you have this play, and again, it's emotional wellness.
Okay, so I was listening, and when you say sometimes you don't feel like taking a bath, well, the question would be how many days? And when you start thinking about that, if I haven't had a bath for 2 or 3 days, that's something to start thinking about. If I don't have an appetite, is that something to start thinking about?
Absolutely. Yes, because if you're a person that takes a shower every day, and then you realize you're going 2 or 3 days without taking a shower, and that continues and becomes a pattern, then that's a sign that something is amiss.
So we're slipping.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
We're slipping in our everyday living. I love that everyday living when we don't want to, we want to hold on to our rights, as I heard you, Margaret Conley saying, and from 3 different perspectives, either fear or rights, or it's something that is being taken from us, and we want to hold on to that. This was an interesting dialogue to see how people are dealing with depression. And I heard you mention anxiety, and that's not on our list, but both of you are well versed in paying attention to anxiety. And I don't know if you want to speak to that or not. And we may come back to that when we deal with depression a little later on. But since people are so reluctant to seek counseling, how do we go about introducing someone to the idea of getting someone to talk to without offending or without creating an issue? How do you introduce that? Because the first thing they're going to say is, "There's nothing wrong with me. I'm okay. I'm not stressed. I don't have any issues."
Mm-hmm.
But you know that they are different.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a lot of times what people will say is the kinds of things you just mentioned, Dr. Shera. But when you see someone and you believe that they're struggling and they need help, one of their biggest fears is that you think that they are crazy. And the assumption is that if you are suggesting that they talk with someone, it means that they are crazy. And so the person might say to themselves, "I am not crazy." And it's okay to tell them, well, I'm not saying you're crazy. It's just you're different. You're not acting the way that you normally act. You're not responding the way that you normally do. And I think at times it's also helpful to be transparent and say to the person, well, I've had some struggles too. And I know what it's like to be anxious. I know how debilitating it can be to be depressed. And I think by being self-disclosing, that can encourage the person to seek help if you think that that's what's needed. I think it's important when you're talking to someone and you're trying to encourage them to get help, do listen to them. Listen to what they're saying. And if possible, repeat back to them what you've heard them say, because that lets them know that you have heard them. I think it's also important not to judge the person, not to say to the person, oh, you should not feel that way. Don't argue with them. Just do everything you can to encourage them to seek help. And if necessary, say, I'll go with you. I can't go into that session with you, but I can go with you. And you can ask the person, is there anybody that you've talked with in the past that you might want to talk with now? But you do everything that you can to encourage them to seek the help that they need. And again, offer to help them find a counselor or therapist. Just let them know that you're with them and that you're respecting them, and that you don't, quote unquote, think that just because they're seeing a counselor, they are crazy.
Okay. I see you. I hear something coming from you, Dr. Conley. I'm going to call you doctor because you're going to get this.
I think I should pursue. I had some things I had to knock out. My birthday is next Sunday, so I'm trying to make sure I finished some things before I turned 40. But I was giggling because I heard Dr. Weaver, with the encouragement piece, and people think you're crazy. Again, we equate mental health with crazy. Crazy is such a negative, nasty, wrong word in mental health. Yes. It's horrible. It's actually, for me, it's worse than using the word mad. So mad means you're uncontrollable in all emotion, like things are happening, versus angry. And anger can move out into different quadrants: frustration, sadness, things like that. So, but they do. We taught ourselves, okay, if you say you got a counselor, you're crazy. I mean, it's even like a whisper moment. So what I normally do, I kind of have a unique way having a conversation. Some people are afraid to do that because it's right at the tip of ethical, but having a conversation to allow them to lead out if they come. Also in therapeutic practice, as long as you sign a release of information, you can invite someone to your session, but I also let my clients know, if you're inviting this person, is this a person that you trust with your information, so that you can work while we're here to get through it. So allowing clients, and this technique more so started out with play therapy, where it's kind of self-led, but I found that it works better, in my opinion, with adults as they lead through and guide through getting out of their head. That's what I'll say. I make it really plain. The stuff that they have packed down in there, and leading their session, and we just being attuned and allowing them to be in a space where it is held. And so if you define it like that, or you give it to people like that, a lot of people that I see have come to enjoy the therapeutic experience, because at this point, I'm not your life coach. That's not my job. My job is to be attuned with where you are. And for some people, they think, well, you're getting paid to be quiet, but I'm literally feeling what you're feeling. And I'm following or staying. One method calls it staying in the tail of the comment. I'm not trying to suggest anything. I want you to work through it. And we've seen a lot of dialectical work with COVID, because talk therapy really wasn't working for some people, because we're talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. Where you go, you're talking about it. So to do talk therapy or cognitive behavioral, I don't want to talk about it anymore. So, but to sit with what the trigger may be. Again, I gave 3 different ethnicities. They all gave a different answer with the insurrection and it was the same question. What did you think was going to happen to you? And even with COVID, March. I remember it like it was yesterday because it was my birthday when COVID was announced in America. So it has been 1 year as of Sunday when we found out, that America would be in a state of a lockdown. Just to hear that, even those who are watching tonight, when I said it, probably did something. It probably caused some level of somatic response. So your body responded. You might have heated up. I can tell you when I said it, I fluttered because I remembered immediately where I was, what happened March 14th of 2020. I remember that. Even tenseness happened. Those are things that we have to pay attention to right now because we're a year into this pandemic. And how's your body responding? Not just your brain, because now we're realizing mental health and physical health are going hand in hand. Like, how has your body responded to the overthinking of what may happen to you? Are you now losing stamina? Do you have issues with joint pain? Do you have issues with blood pressure? Are you having constant headaches? Because it's all playing into part. So it's really important that we look at that and we pay attention to it in the invite to come and talk about now our emotional wellness and not just say it's crazy. It's not crazy at all. I have some clients that are like, I can't sleep after the pandemic. Well, where's your mind traveling to? And I've had people to say, well, my mind traveled to grief because now I keep thinking about how my mom died. And my mom died 10 years ago, but I can't go visit her grave. That whole thing may have sounded crazy. No, it didn't, because normally I would go visit her grave at this time, but I haven't been able to visit it all year. So now I'm thinking about death myself. And what does it look like if I die and people can't come see me? That literally releases pressure because you've just been holding it. So that is how we might can turn and see to invite someone to seek out a professional for mental health services.
Oh my goodness, that was so real, because that's everything that's going on with all of us right now. The fact that we, if we get sick, God forbid that we'd have to go to the hospital. And if any of our family members are sick, we can't go see them. We can't. And then the other part is that isolating ourselves, staying to yourself, and in our isolation, sometimes we don't get the exercise that we would normally do. And that would, then your body, maybe younger folks don't, but for the older generation, I call us the teenagers. These are the young seniors. We're not moving as much, and the body begins to atrophy. It begins to take care of what's going on in your mind. So you said a lot there, and to be able to tap into someone, I was thinking about a friend of mine who I was sharing about stress and anxiety, and we don't always recognize it when we are not our usual. If you are with somebody all the time, we're the ones who can tell that you're different. Mm-hmm. And I had to share with somebody, if I'm different, say to me, I want you to listen to me now, or have some code word. And I think we may have to think about doing just that for people who are close to us and people who who know us well. Mm-hmm. So these are all. I hope the listening audience is picking up those signs of mental health, and that affects our physical health and even our spiritual health. So we'll continue to move on. I want to talk to you two specialists on what is the difference between a therapist and most psychiatrists. What's the difference?
Oh, well, I'm going to do a quick one, and I'll try to, Loretta McNear also asked the question. So I'm going to try to maybe block it all in. Because she was talking about someone who was anxiety filled. And they didn't want to come out. So I'll try to answer my best way. And then Dr. Weaver, please come in for that. Because she's speaking to a person who will more than likely go see a therapist because this family member is saying, they don't want to talk to anybody. They're isolated. They just want to be left alone. but they consistently post on social media. So this is, and this is not a normal state for this person, because they've experienced loss of multiple family members. So I would invite them to go see a therapist or have a therapeutic voice. So a therapist is not going to be a prescriber. And it doesn't sound like this person needs a prescriber. It sounds like they need to focus in on grief. Grief doesn't necessarily have to mean death. This person has had multiple losses, but they're grieving this sudden change in the state and quality of their life. And so because of that, I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. And because media is such an outlet where you're untouchable in media, I see that often because I can cut you off. I can block you. I can say what I want to say, and I can meme you to death. I can send 18 memes, tag you in all of them, and then I can unfriend you. So that's the person is speaking to that and being mad at God, because what happens if I called you, you're going to try to convince me, if you're a family member or friend, that God is omniscient, God is perfect, this is God's perfect will, whatever you may say. And they don't want to hear that because this hurts. I'm losing people, I'm losing myself. So they want to see a professional. So professionals are licensed marriage family therapists, LPCs, LCSWs, LMSWs if they're sitting with other licensed clinical social workers, or APCs if they're sitting with other licensed professional counselors, or psychologists who have a higher area where they can do more diagnostic and more testing. None of the individuals I named, unless they have a special credential, from my understanding, can do prescribing. We would have to refer you to someone. For psychiatry, a lot of people get these confused because they do fall into the same mental health space, but psychiatry is literally a medical doctor or a DO or someone that has a license, or they have a DEA registered number to be able to prescribe. Those sessions are not in true fashion or in historical fashion long sessions. I was fortunate enough to know someone who mentored me and helped me, who actually was a practicing social worker and a psychiatrist. Those are rare to find, where they can have a session with you and prescribe. They're also very costly because they understand who they are. So the other thing is the psychiatrist is going to cost more because of who they are. And it's not because they want to overcharge you. They just have a greater risk in the care for you, because if I give you the wrong medication, or I don't pay attention to the scenario because I'm moving fast, 15 to 20 minutes is what you're going to get from a psychiatrist.
Wow.
I might prescribe you the wrong thing. So their insurance is a little higher than ours. Versus seeing someone who their profession is to give you 45 to 55 minutes. If you would like a longer session, they're going to advise you what that comes with, and they're going to walk the path with you to this healing space. Be attuned with you and be present with you, to get you back acclimated to a social space where you're comfortable enough to be. And it could still be, I don't want to be around family, but at least I'm not isolated venting on Facebook. You know, I can now at least text you and say, I do not want to be around because. They can give you a because. So, but our job is to get people back. So that is the difference that I have understood. And so I know that Dr. Weaver may have more to that, because from my understanding, I just found that some psychologists have, I guess they went and got their nurse practitioner piece, and they're prescribing now. And again, wow. COVID changed a lot of rules for things. Wow. So, yeah, a lot of rules for things.
So you said a psychologist is going to get their nurse practitioner so they can prescribe.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. And then they don't go all the way for psychiatry, because that's a whole MD level. Is that correct? Is that what I heard you say?
It is correct.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot to take in. I'm still processing, listening and probing and asking the right questions and sitting on the sofa and 20 minutes versus 40 minutes. And so much more. Come on, Dr. Weaver, Margaret.
I think the key thing to keep in mind with regard to psychiatrists is what Dr. Connolly said, that the psychiatrists prescribe medications. The other professions, the counselors, psychologists, do not typically prescribe medications unless they have gone out and got some special training. But there's some risk in that. I mean, for psychologists or others who go for special training to prescribe medication, the liability goes through the roof at that point, which is a reason so many people would not want to do that. But that's the main thing, is a psychiatrist can prescribe medications. Now, if someone is in need of help, typically, I would refer them first to a therapist or counselor. And typically, the therapist, the counselor, will try to determine whether this person needs medication. And if they do indeed need medication, then you refer them to a psychiatrist. Now, if someone comes to me and they're already on medication prescribed by their PCP, and I believe it's working, then if it's not broken, don't fix it. But if it appears that the medication prescribed by their PCP is not working, and I do believe they need medication, then I would, in all likelihood, refer them to a psychiatrist who is also an MD, but that's their specialty area. Now, one of the things that I try to do when I do refer someone to meet with a psychiatrist, I try to explain to them that what they're going to experience is going to be very different than what they experience with me. And because if they meet with a psychiatrist, you're talking about maybe 10 to 15 minutes.
Wow.
Because they're MDs in every sense of the word. So they're not going to really take that much time. And I also try to prepare them because many of them assume that because they're going to meet with a psychiatrist, that person is going to be interested in talking about their history, their childhood, and all those kinds of things. And many of them are actually offended when they meet with a psychiatrist and they start talking about those things. And the psychiatrist says to them, well, do you have a therapist? Do you have a counselor? Which is their way of saying, I don't do that.
Okay.
It didn't always work that way. Decades ago, psychiatrists actually did therapy as well. They did it all. But that has just changed. And most psychiatrists, with some few exceptions, there are some psychiatrists who also do therapy, but that's very, very, very rare. Most of them are there to prescribe medications. And that's kind of the bottom line. And you really do have to prepare clients when they're going to see a psychiatrist, because they tend to think that they're going to get someone who's going to spend that 45, 50 minutes with them. And that's not typically what's going to happen.
Oh, wow. I just saw that Dorothy McMichael is watching. What a way to clarify that, because I kind of thought I knew the difference between a therapist. Now, you were exchanging a counselor and a therapist in the same category. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then when you go to a psychiatrist, just know you're not going to have the therapist or counseling time schedule. They are not going to give it to you. They're going to ask you a few questions, and then they're going to prescribe some medication and boot you on out the door, kind of, sort of, or recommend a therapist or somebody for you to talk to. Well, I appreciate that clarification, that there would be those who need to know the difference, and just the whole idea of going to either one puts a little bit of maybe discomfort, but I guess it just depends on your desire to live a wholesome life. I'll say it that way, to live a well-lived life, because you want to be able, because therapists are trained, as I understand, to be able to raise the right questions to get you to understand what you're going through, what you're dealing with. Is that correct? Can you probe enough to get us to understand what we're going through?
I don't want to say probe, because they taught us in school we should not ask probing questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Week, for laughing with me.
So you won't probe, but
you try not to probe, but we ask open-ended questions. So it's supposed to be able to open you up. I can't say in 3 years of private practice, and God, I've been social working I've been at it for almost 20 years, 19 years. I haven't asked probing questions. So, because sometimes people are stuck. So, I can see the stuck, but it doesn't mean the whole time. But I will ask open-ended questions. One of my favorite open-ended questions is, what happened to you? So in our community, often, what's wrong with you is what we hear. This is really something to use with teenagers, young adults, because what happened to you, is a beautiful question to ask, because then it's open-ended. I come to find out that this person has maybe experienced some level of abuse we have never talked about or whatnot. And it gives the person the space to be vulnerable, because they're trusting me with that. What happened to you? Like, it centers in. When I say what's wrong with you, I immediately put them into a shamed space. Like, because I'm telling you, you're wrong. So what's wrong with you? I'm telling you, you're wrong in the space you're sitting in.
That's good.
And it's harmful versus what happened to you. That opens up a world of things that we can walk through and we can work through, because it also opens up that space where we hide our trauma, and it literally awakens that space, because finally it's noticed, like, what happened to me? Oh wow, I get to talk, so, and you find out a lot from childhood to what's happening at work, and that is the question for me in my professional career that has literally changed how I meet the client where they are. And it literally saved my life. I mean, it was a question that a social worker asked me one day, and it literally stopped me from a path I was headed on. And it got me focused in on where I wanted to go educationally and, again, life-wise. Like, how do I want to maintain my emotional wellness when you ask me what happened to me? And it put me in a space of trust with this person where I didn't feel uncomfortable. To this day, I don't feel uncomfortable talking with this person about anything, because I know they're listening and that they care.
Mm-hmm. And just what happened to you gives the focus you decide what you will share, and then they can select whatever that thing is that has brought them into your presence. And when you raise that question, that's a good leading question. And then that, like you said, it makes you feel a little more comfortable with being with that person. So how do we find a therapist, and how do we know who to choose, and what's going to happen on our first session? I think we talked about that a little bit, but where do you go look for a therapist? Because everybody, we're going through enough right now that people want to talk to somebody, or we're staying in and not talking to anybody. And I'm not sure how healthy that is. So how do you choose a therapist? What's your measure?
Well, I think that certainly it's a challenge to just even address this whole issue for so many people. And I think the first place to start, if someone is feeling that they need to talk with someone, if someone's feeling they need to address some issues, just begin by talking to a family member or a friend, and just simply saying to them, I'm feeling very sad. I'm not feeling like myself. I believe I need to talk to someone. And there are people who will tell you, well, I was feeling that way, and I decided to go to this counseling center or talk to this person or that person. And so I think the first place to start would be to say to a family member or a friend, I feel like I need to talk to someone, and just throw it out there. And many times they can tell you what they have tried, or they heard someone else say, go to this place or that place. I think also, if you're feeling that you need to talk with someone, don't know where to start with a pastor. I know at our counseling center, we get a lot of referrals from pastors who recognize they don't have the time, energy, or whatever to deal with some of those issues. So pastors, go to your pastor. Talk to your doctor, your PCP. Ask your doctor, I really feel like I need to talk with someone. And a lot of people don't realize it, but you can also call your insurance company and make it very clear to your insurance company. You can be very specific. You can say, for example, I want to meet with an African-American male. And the insurance company should be able to give you that kind of information. For a long time, insurance companies have even asked providers, do you provide quote unquote Christian counseling? because I think so many of the insurance companies found that the people wanted to know, is there someone I can go and meet with who respects my beliefs? So call your insurance company and ask some real specifics. Also, employment assistance programs on jobs. Many companies have what they call EAPs, employment assistance programs, where you can talk to someone that's connected with your job. Now, some people are reluctant to do that because they're concerned about confidentiality and that sort of thing. But those are some possibilities in terms of, how do you find the person that you want to talk with, and when you meet with someone, keep in mind that you are to a large extent also the consumer of a product. And if you don't like that person, you feel like you're not connecting well with that person, then you don't have to come back. There are all alternatives out there. You're not just stuck with meeting with that person. And you just recognize that here's someone to help me. And if you walk out of the experience feeling, I think I can work with this person, great. If you walk out thinking, no, I don't think we click, that's okay. Just and move on.
And you know that right away. It's just like meeting someone. When you connect, there's something about your life energy or your spirit or your personality or your countenance. There's something that helps you understand or connects you. And then there's also that which will say, this one's not for me.
That's exactly right.
Oh, that's good to know. And to be able to contact your insurance company was a good idea. I don't know that I've thought about that, but certainly. And then certainly with your job, people may not want to move in that direction when you're looking for someone to talk to, because then your boss will have labeled or say something's going on with Sherry, so we need to keep an eye on her. So I'm not sure unless it was somebody on my job that I would really trust that I would do that. But those are all good. Responses. Now I want to shift gears just a little bit. I'm going to move to this question because mental health is not new. It's been in existence since the beginning of time, and you can take it all the way back to biblical times. So I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and I know that God is a healer, and I know that Jesus dealt with people who had mental health issues. It may not have been labeled mental health issues. And so can you speak to any biblical situations, either of you, of issues of depression or evidence of mental health? I can present some, but I know Dr. Margaret Conley that you can speak to, and Dr. Weaver as well. These issues of mental health that are in the scriptures that let us know that it's not new, and that we can, get help some kind of way.
Oh, well, I was trying to take it off mute. I apologize for that. So the first one it's always my go-to for people when we talk about Bible and mental health. It's a New Testament text, the Gospels, and it's the woman who was possessed by 7 spirits. So we have taught that text traditionally. I've even had an opportunity to teach on this at not Memphis Theological, but it's the undergraduate part of Memphis Theological, MCUTS. And I had a great discussion with those individuals. I thought it was funny because it was the challenge, but Mary Magdalene was possessed by 7 spirits. So wow. In the mental health world, we would say this was more than likely some level of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia because she was not aware of, she had no coherence of what was going on. Instead of schizoaffective is how I saw it, which is where she's able to be present. We have demonized individuals with this text. And for some strange reason, we seem to think we are calling schizophrenia someone whoring. So I've never in life, when I was a kid, I used to challenge pastors about this text. I'm like, where are we finding that she's a whore? Because that's what they would preach. It brings flavor to it. Black preaching literally ends with a sound. And so you want to bring flavor to it. But at the end, we're not addressing what's really happening in the text. And I understand we're seeking out the deliverance part, but she has 7 spirits that are taking over her. So when you bring someone in your office who is telling you, I'm schizophrenic and I have this psychotropic or this antipsychotic that's helping me, but they're hearing voices telling them to do things, we have to pay attention to that. The church is often scared of that. And so we want to push that away because God should be able to heal that. I don't know if God will be able to do so if we don't want to address that that's what's present. God shows up when we draw near. So, but when we act like it doesn't exist, I don't know if we make room for it. And so that's a clear indication of mental health. But there are other facets in the Gospels where we praise those. Jesus moving into a space where he's talking to 3 dead individuals as he translates into an arena to talk to them. That too will be seen as mental health if it wasn't biblical. Somebody in another faith tradition might say, okay, that's demon worship or something. But no, I mean, he really was speaking to ancestor. And the reason I brought that up is because literally had my friend and I do a Bible study and someone challenged that. They were like, well, that's demonic. But I was like, Jesus literally was talking to 3 witnesses or 3 elders or 3 spirits of someone. I mean, we praise that in the Gospels. But as soon as we say we want to allow our ancestors to come in, which is African, then that's demonic. And so which one is it? Because now we want to say we're crazy. That's not fair because we do have a right to feel and we do carry things over. And that's not just me saying it. I mean, that's scientific study that we carry things over into our DNA. And so we're going to be in touch with that which has been here before. And so if that's the case, then how do we move that out of a mental health space and saying it is crazy? And then how do we not demonize it in church spaces? So, and then another example, Old Testament, I thoroughly believe that David walked in some level of attachment issue. And we find that because David's own father didn't acknowledge him when asked about him. And so we watch David's pattern of having issues with attachment in marital spaces. David literally just took somebody's wife because he wanted her. Like, that's improper attachment. You just can't have it because you want it. But he did. David had issues with attaching to his children. David had issues with attachment. And so you go through that and see that one line of Jesse, his father, saying, I don't know this other son, and then coming back saying, oh, well, it's another one outside. That's a big indicator of the relationship that Jesse and David had. And you can watch that even in families that come in. So those, and again, I went through a span because mental health isn't just a mood disorder. Again, it's emotional wellness that affects the quality of life. So if your family is in disruption, that may not be mood. That may literally be a family disruption that's causing everything to be off. David, i.e. family disruption. And you find that historical family pattern because we see that it even started in Ruth. Boaz and Ruth had a child and Naomi takes the child and nurses it. That's questionable. And it speaks to a larger scale for community because our community is nursing our children. We don't know why the parents can't take care, if the parents want to take care, because that's not in the text. But we know that community mother is now nursing the child. What happens to this nurse child when they don't have that proper connection with parental figures or with their biological parents? So those are spaces of mental health that I see in the biblical text.
You have given a tremendous amount. Go ahead, Dr. Margaret.
I was thinking, I think there's an example too in the Old Testament with the prophet Elijah, where after his just doing all this wonderful and glorious stuff with the prophets of Baal, and he came out on top of everything. In the very next chapter, this same prophet asked God to take his life. In essence, he said to God, it is enough. I'm through. I'm tired. Take my life. And I think the beauty of that is how God responded. God did not say to Elijah, oh, what do you mean? You're not trusting me now? He didn't say to him, Elijah, have you forgotten what I've already done for you? He did not do any of those things. And when you read that chapter, he really nurtured him. and allow him time to sleep in the whole 9 yards. And at the end of the chapter, what we find is that God brings Elisha into Elijah's life. And I think that maybe that's a statement that Elijah had been going it alone and needed some help. So I think there are examples throughout the Bible of how God does deal with what we call mental health issues.
Yes. And Dr. You brought up a good point, because that's resourcing. So we watch how God in this space, this not tangible God, was present, holding space, attuned with, intending to. And then here we find this space in mental health, we'll call it resourcing. So in resource assistance. And so Elisha shows up. Even with Elijah, you still find resourcing of assistance, because again, he isolated. It was much like to Mrs. McNear, isolation, don't want to talk, leave me alone. And it was people waiting on Elijah to come out, but Elijah again had to work through that as God nurtured. And then here is another space of resourcing, and finding that inner strength. And we watch Elijah go back and forth with that. I was challenged. I challenged one of my professors at ITC, and I asked, I said, well, do you think he was bipolar? And so he said, you might want to look into that, because it's up and down, consistent cycle for Elijah. And we see him cycle down, we see him cycle up. We see him in some manic phases, so throughout the lifespan of the text with Elijah, we watch it, which the glorious part of the manic phase is him crossing the Jordan, which we praise, and him getting caught up in fiery chariot and tumultuous storm. And so I invite students, even when I have an opportunity to teach that, do you think that was beautiful? Because we teach it as if it's beautiful. He got ripped apart in a fiery chariot in a storm. He was human, but he walked right into it. So this is, and he desired to do that. But again, we glorify it because that's what church has told us to do. But what pain was he sitting in to say, this is it, and prepare the thing that had been resourced, or the person that had been resourced, to walk through. And he did this in front of people. So he still desired, or set in that space of wanting to end life. And so here we go. But that's a hard space to sit with the body of Christ. Because now you're saying that God allowed him to kill himself. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that he teetered with his importance of being here and his esteem, and how he was able to hold himself in regard and actualize himself into his community, into the things that he served, into the places where they received him or did not receive him. And so that is where we can see how that mental health play goes there. And also mental health, it looks at your physical location, like what's happening there. Judges is another one I use, with the woman who literally, the concubine, she had the man take her to her father's house, and he sent her back with him. She was in fear of life. This is a domestic violence situation, and sent her back with the man. He ended up killing her and spreading her body throughout the tribe. We preached that, but he physically chopped her up and mailed her off. So what happens to women who are crying out? This is National Women's Month. So, what happens to women that are crying out? I'm in a domestic violence situation. Can you help me? And we dismiss it because it doesn't appear that there may be a problem on the outside, and they're losing their lives. So again, we're sitting in the middle of a pandemic where everybody's affected, but the consistent issues have not stopped. They actually increased. More abuse came, more drug abuse, physical abuse, things just came. More risky behaviors came. You find that there was an increase in HIV rates, an increase in STDs overall, because we're in a space where we don't know, and we're responding the best way we know how in our humanity. And I'm so glad you asked that question about that, because it's right there in the text. If we want to take the time to look at it and see it, Dr. Bailey would call it the truth of the text, because it can be ugly. And he said, it's not ugly, it's just what's written. That is what's there.
It is. Awesome. Oh, this was so rich. This was so rich. I did see a question go across, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to respond to the questions that come. What about knowing what method is best suited for you? And I believe we're talking about the therapist versus psychiatrist. Is that the way the question is presented? because there's a different method of therapy. And how does one choose a therapist that utilizes the most effective method, or know which method is best for them?
Well, I think one of the purposes of that first session, as we mentioned earlier, is to kind of try to determine whether this is going to be a good fit. And again, the client is a consumer of a product, and you certainly have every right to ask the therapist, how do you approach counseling? How do you approach therapy? What is it that you do? What can I expect? And so that way you get some idea of how this person is going to approach the therapy session. And so again, you have every right to ask those kind of questions and have the therapist to kind of explain or give an overview of how they approach therapy. You have every right to ask those kind of questions. And although you might not know all the technical terms, they hopefully can give you some idea of how they approach things, because not everybody approaches therapy in the same way.
That's what I would expect of all of us who are different here tonight. What a mighty visitation of therapy we had tonight, with the various facets of it. There's so much more, but we're at the end of our time setting. But I do want to ask, with all of this that's going on, what would you say to our listening audience for those who are dealing particularly with people who they know want to help with some counseling, or somebody who's thinking about it and doesn't know which direction to go? What one suggestion or idea or solution to their issue would you suggest?
Well, I certainly think it's very important that if you think you have an issue, you think that someone has an issue, deal with it, address it. The last thing you want to do is to pretend as if nothing's wrong. The last thing you want to do is to pretend that, oh, maybe this will just go away. If you're at a place where you recognize that something is off, either with you or with someone else, don't just dismiss it. You do want to address it and find some way to address that issue. Don't suppress it, don't repress it, and don't pretend that it's not there. Be honest with yourself, and be honest with your friend. If it's your friend that has the issue, deal with it, address it.
Wow.
To piggyback, the honesty part is really big. So and I think the other part of the question too is not even just individually, but if family sees it. For family, don't push, just hold space and let them know I recognize you. I see you. That normally, once again, I see you, I'm here. Don't bombard with questions, because that normally shuts someone down. I don't want to answer your questions, so I would answer them. But just holding space and being honest with yourself about how long that space can be held. That's empathetic. Sympathy is to take on it, which no one's designed to take on other people's problems. People tell me that's not true. Pastors are, but the Bible gives all of us permission to cast our cares upon God, for God cares for us. And so I'm not designed to carry the weight of your pain, but I am, as a human being, designed to sit with you, honor space with you, and then when you're ready to move that pain to where it can be managed. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm the one managing the pain. So, but we can do it together. So for families, just let your loved one know I see you. I recognize you, and I'm here. And not that if you need me, always. Well, no, I won't generalize it, but 90% of the time it's a turn off, because if I need you, they start running. Like, well, I mean, I needed you to do something, but you didn't show up. So I'm just holding space with you the best I can. Dr. Weaver said it best. The best I can. So I did a percentage the other day. She was watching, but my friend, she's a therapist as well, out of Augusta, Georgia. We had just a regular counter scale. She was showing me what she did, and I used it the other day with a client. And I said, how well do you hold space with yourself? And so the counter, we moved it across. It's just regular old school counter. And I said, it's 10 10 little prongs. So, and she literally put 40%. She said, I only hold 40%. She said, this is beautiful. So she's like, she said, the 60%, I don't know where it's held because I don't pay attention to me. And then I asked her how much weight or how much space does she hold for her family? It was a brother or something. And she slid all 10 of them over. And that was an eye-opening experience because she realized her self-care was so limited because she gave most of her care to a family member who she came in arguing with me about, because the person literally told her he didn't want her involved in his affairs at this time. She was so hurt. So sometimes it's just recognizing how much of me am I giving away that the person doesn't even want. So wow. The same thing, that Dr. Weaver said, I'm going to give you the space that I can give you. And you have to define what that space is. Like I can only give you an hour and not feel guilty about that hour. It's because that's all I can give you, and it's healthy. It's a healthy hour. And it's a mutual agreed upon hour. And so taking care of self while thinking that you're taking care of family is a great way to manage that emotional wellness, mental health space. And even the invite to go get help. Let that person make that decision. And if you need it, acknowledge that you do. I love Dr. Weaver's suggestions. Like, go talk to your pastor. And pastors in the pandemic, I've talked to several of them, have now acknowledged, I am not a counselor because Isaiah says that he's a wonderful counselor. Like, I can only counsel you as far as I can, and then I'm going to refer you out. And so a good start would be to go see your pastor, spiritual leader, or even that friend that you think you can sit with, and they're going to be honest with you and let you know how much weight they can hold before they send you to someone who's professionally trained. So, and I think the other question too was what's the best method? Dr. Weaver answered that beautifully too. That first process is an intake process. Mm-hmm. And that's the part where I see a lot of Black females get frustrated because why are you asking me so many questions? Well, it's an assessment. And then we decide on a treatment plan together. And we decide if your therapist is excellent at what they do, they're going to do some psychoeducation with you about different methods that can be used as best suited for how your assessment has come around. And so that is really how you determine with your professional, your therapist, of the suited treatment. And a lot of people, they don't, from my understanding, not getting that, but that is what a licensed professional counselor, a psychotherapist, that's what they're going to do is they're going to do assessment. And then they're going to talk about the modalities that will probably work well with the situation at hand.
Wow, this has been really, really, really good. I hear you talk about how much of yourself can you give. And so the question I would ask each of you is, I know your schedules are tight because so many people are in need of counseling, but should someone call in or decide they wanted to schedule an appointment, are you all available? I know your schedules are tight, but would it take some time to get to you? How could we be in touch with you, or can we be in touch with you during these challenging times?
I have a group practice, which we finally found two therapists that would really work well with MLC Consulting. And so I currently am booked up. And because, we talk about self-care a lot as clinicians, but you'll find that we have really poor self-care sometimes because we care. And so my challenge this year was to do better self-care practices. So, I'm sitting in a space where I'm taking 2 days off so that I can recoup. Because again, we hold space. I try my best not to bring it home. It's not for me to do. But we also have to realize that this has been a heavier time for therapeutic space. We've had more clients than before. And so we now have to acknowledge for ourselves, I need time. And so to reach me, you can leave a message. Email is probably best for me. But if you need to be seen, I would definitely say I would refer you to one of my other clinicians or refer out if they don't meet, because they too have their specializations. I have two wonderful people who work with me, and one specializes in working with play therapy methods. Another one specializes in working with family violence. And she also works with reproductive issues. Those are their specialties, but they both do like cognitive behavioral and DBT. But those are their specialties. So, if they don't meet the need, it's no shame for a therapist to say, let me refer you out. If that person is shameful about that, I pray for the therapist. But if I know I can't meet your need, I'm absolutely going to say, let me give you 3 options that I'm researching with you as a client, so that we can get you the best care.
Awesome. Dr. Weaver?
Yes, I too am a part of a group practice, Keystone Counseling Center, and I'm working with a waiting list right now, but my other colleagues, some of my colleagues are available. Some of them have waiting lists as well. And we do refer out to other people if we cannot provide the services.
Okay, so there you have it, listening audience. I thank you all for joining in with us tonight. I saw a note there from Reverend Emil Ennis, who joined us. Thank you for joining us, and in Miami, Florida, McNair, Loretta, and Pam Patterson. Thank you also for being a part of our fellowship tonight. And we are a beacon of hope, and that's our message for you today, because we stand on the scripture that says, "For I know the plans I have used as the Lord, to prosper you and not to bring you harm, but to give you a future and a hope." And our hope helps us press through this pandemic. And as we press through this pandemic, we have to continue to, as we started out earlier, talk about mental health. We need to live a life that we sing about in our song. Mental health doesn't mean you're sick. It means that you are paying attention to what's going on with your life, and that you spend time with yourself to do whatever it takes to give you some balance, and to give you some strength, and to give you some refreshments. I've had an awesome time tonight. I want to thank my panelists, Dr. Margaret O. Weaver and Minister Margaret Conn. Both of you have blessed us, and when we brought that spiritual, biblical information in there, it was awesome. And we are on assignment, and God has a plan for each of us. And by the time we reach the end of this pandemic, and we don't know how much longer it's going to be, but we want to be standing before a holy God saying, "Thank you, God, I made it." That we can stand strong with all of the challenges that we're dealing with this pandemic. And this is not normal. This is what we're accustomed to, and we don't know what the new normal is going to be. I don't know what that means, but what we do know is that we have pressed our way. We've left the things that we need to leave behind, and we press for the mark of the prize of the high calling. We all have a calling, and we are being positioned for that call. And when the doors open and the curtain rises, we'll be standing before a holy God, said, "Thank God I made it, and I'm here to be used for whatever the assignment that you have positioned me here to do." So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to my listening audience. Thank you for questions. I don't know anymore, but we'll be back on March the 29th. So we'll be looking forward to seeing each of you again. And we'll continue to go on. One day when the glory comes, we will be sure, and we'll say glory. One day when the battle is won, we'll shout glory. I'm waiting for the glory. Anybody waiting for the glory? I'm waiting for the glory. So glory for one for the Father, one for the Son, and one for the Holy Spirit. We are one. God bless you all. I thank you, Judge Penny Reynolds. I saw your name. And thank you for joining us, listening audience. We'll see you on March the 29th, 8 p.m. Thank you so much. God bless you. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Celebrating the goodness that God has for each of us. Bye now.
Bye-bye.